Hello and welcome to the Political Opinions podcast, where every opinion is given equal footing, and political tolerance and debate are given their proper attention in a world where both are on the decline. Today's episode will cover different opinions on same-sex marriage. Now, same-sex marriage is, I hope at least, pretty self-explanatory. It's a marriage involving two people of the same sex, so male-male, female-female. I guess it could also include other genders, although I'm not entirely sure. This will mainly be limited to the kind of traditional view of same-sex being between male and male and female, but the arguments can apply elsewhere. Now, moving on from that, same-sex marriage has been legalised and is continuing to be legalised in many nations, states in the US and other areas around the world, and marriage for any reason is often considered a basic human right. That being said, however, there are many people in the world, perhaps even a majority, who might still oppose it. And why, you wonder? Well, let's find out. Before we get on to that, let's take a look at the reasons why one might support same-sex marriage. The big issue when coming up to this question is really the question of what marriage actually is. To some, at least those who support same-sex marriage, it is again a basic human right, and it's a legal, societal, and potentially religious even, union between two people who love each other. And many people believe marriage should not be exclusive to certain types of relationship. It's not a traditional source of the nuclear family, if you will, but rather a means for two people who love each other to come together in union. This, of course, leads on to another question of marriage, which is, what are the purposes regarding procreation or making babies, essentially? In the past, marriage's almost entire purpose, beyond, say, elites and their political ties and diplomatic relations, was all about procreation. To some, again, however, marriage is not solely for the purpose of procreation, but rather it's a union of love between individuals. And as such, even if same-sex marriage can't procreate, that doesn't mean they shouldn't get married, because if we did follow that definition, then infertile couples and any couple who don't want children also shouldn't be allowed to get married, which doesn't sound very good. Now, of course, a lot of this does come to the history of marriage and what it was in the past, and a big area around that was religion. Religion is often the epicenter of marriage. Most people get married in churches. They wear rings which are often religious. They are married by priests. Today, however, that isn't always the case. You don't have to get married in a church or by a priest. You can get married in marriage centers. Anyone who is qualified to can marry you. In some US states, you can even get married in casinos, for example. Bit odd, but there you are. And as such, some today believe that religion is not the epicenter of marriage. Marriage has gone beyond it. It's no longer a religious act, but a civil and really personal act of love and union. And even beyond that, many religions nowadays are continuing and introducing support for same-sex marriage. So in the past, religions may very well, and even today many are, opposed to same-sex marriages and just homosexuality in general. That trend is reducing in at least Western society. Speaking of society, what are the societal standards around this? Well, to some, society today is becoming far more accepting and open to new ideas, and this of course includes allowing same-sex marriage to occur. And as such, although many people may oppose it on religious, moral, or just personal grounds, society as a whole, some believe, is becoming more liberal and progressive, thus allowing same-sex marriage to occur. Now, taking a step away from the societal and kind of purpose of marriage side, the other side of marriage that is almost equally as important is the legal side. Marriage comes with many rights and protections for couples, as well as the messy divorce side, but we'll ignore that bit for now. To some, same-sex marriage, and the key point here is marriage, provides homosexual couples with legal rights and equalities. It treats them as equals to heterosexual marriages. If you denied marriage to these people, you would therefore essentially be treating them as second-class citizens, which goes against the whole idea of equality in the modern world. And then finally, there is of course a question of what will happen in the future with this. Well, some believe the future is good, essentially. Same-sex marriage is just another step towards a more inclusive and accepting society, and is a sign that many in society are starting to rid themselves of potentially outdated views. With all that being said, there are still those who disagree, and some very, very aggressively, let's say. Firstly, you have again this question of the tradition and purpose of marriage. Some believe, at least when you look to history, that marriage has always been a matrimony between man and woman. That is really the fundamental basis for historical marriage. It has been between a man and a woman and nothing else, and as such, by allowing this new type of same-sex marriage, undermines this historical tradition and reduces the actual institution of marriage to something that is more of just a social construct than an essential part of many people's lives. Speaking of life, let's come back to the creation of it. Some believe, again particularly when looking to history, that marriage has always been for the purpose of procreation, and as such, same-sex couples and other couples who can't create children shouldn't really be getting married. There is of course this whole other argument on the fact that some people oppose same-sex couples adopting children, but that's not the focus of today, so we're not going to go into it. But essentially, some believe that if you can't make kids, you shouldn't get married, because that has always been the purpose of it. And who decided that purpose? Well, religion. In the past, religion is just a tad important, and to some, religious marriage has traditionally, historically again, been opposed to same-sex coupling. Marriage is almost inherently religious. In the Christian world, it's a union before God. Again, it takes place in a church, normally by a priest. It doesn't happen for no reason. And in the past, there was always a priest who would marry people, and even the ones who could annul a marriage. And to many people in the religious sector, and just in religion generally, there is this long-standing opposition to homosexuality, which occurred first, again, in, say, the words of the Bible, of killing homosexuals. Not particularly pleasant, but that has really morphed into this modern view to many people, that even if they're not inherently opposed to homosexuality in general, the fact that it is a religious act of marriage, a union before God, and if God opposes homosexuality, then as such same-sex marriages go against that whole idea, essentially. And even if you're not looking at it from a religious standpoint, society-wise or societal standards-wise, there are of course criticisms to be made. One is again this fact that the institution of marriage is diminished. Same-sex marriage reduces to some the moral value of wedlock and diminishes to some very important social values, such as, say, the nuclear family. Some believe that the nuclear family is the foundation upon which modern society is built, and by allowing any form of variation in marriage, we actually reduce that. And there is, of course, this wider question of, is progressive inherently good? Because to some people, being quote-unquote modern and dismissing older and more traditional views isn't always a good thing. To some people, these traditional views are very important, and just because many people today disagree with them doesn't make them inherently bad. Then, of course, in response to legal questions, civil partnerships exist. That's just a fact, at least in certain Western states, and there are many other schemes developed today that allow couples who don't want to or can't get married to share the same legal and other benefits of marriage. Some believe this is the perfect solution because it essentially brings all the benefits of marriage without harming the institution of marriage. And then finally, some believe this future isn't great. Same-sex marriage to some is a slippery slope, because if we allow this degree of marriage, then what's to stop it in 20 years' time going even further? And we allow the greater risk of future degrading, if you will, of the value of marriage. When comparing these points, there are a number of very big questions that are raised. Of course, the key underlying one being what is the actual purpose and value of marriage. And that's the key point of contention. Without going into individual points, you just have to look at it generally to see that many people fear that allowing same-sex marriage degrades the value of marriage as an institution, be it on religious grounds they oppose it, on the purpose of creating children, on the historical value of a man and a woman getting married. All of these are threatened by same-sex marriage. But then on the flip side, many would argue that yes, that used to be the case, but we're not as almost backwards, if you will, for lack of a better word, in many aspects. Marriage today is not about religion or procreation inherently. Of course it can be, but it isn't just at the most foundational level, if you will. Instead, it is a means for people who love each other to come together in a union, to really signify and cement that relationship in a much more deep level. Of course, you could have civil partnerships, for example, but that's just a legal solution, almost a bypass to the wider issue of, okay, we love each other and we want to get married, because in the Western world, getting married is the ultimate symbol that two people love each other. And if you deny that, you come into a whole host of problems. If we're going to go down points individually, let's just do this quite quickly then. Tradition of marriage. Some believe marriage is, again, for everyone who loves each other. Others believe it's traditional, has been between man and woman. Procreation. Some believe it's the union of love between individuals. And others believe that marriage should only be about procreation. If you can't create kids, don't get married. On the question of religion, some believe marriage today has transcended religion. Of course, religious marriages exist, but it's not the only factor. Others, however, believe that religious marriage is the key focal point. Marriage shouldn't have gone beyond religion because then it insults the institution of marriage to some people. And given that religion is often opposed to same-sex marriage, well, yeah, that's the point in itself. On the question of societal standards, some believe society today has moved on. We're accepting and open to new ideas, and we shouldn't prevent people from having a form of marriage you might disagree with 500 years ago. Others, however, believe that same-sex marriage reduces the moral value of wedlock and diminishes important social values. Coming back to this question of the legal side, some believe same-sex marriage provides homosexual couples with legal rights and prevents them being treated as second-class citizens, while others believe a civil partnership provides the benefits of marriage without harming the institution of marriage. And finally, how does this future look? Well, some believe same-sex marriage is a step towards a more inclusive and accepting society, and others believe it's a slippery slope which could further degrade the value of marriage if we allow it to continue. This question of same-sex marriage is really far more deep than it might initially appear. Of course, you have the generic, I don't like homosexuals, and I do like homosexuals, at least I'm accepting of them. And when that plays into marriage, however, given marriage is so important in our world and society today, it raises many interesting questions. To put it briefly, some believe same-sex marriage should occur, either because they, again, want everyone to be treated equally, and believe that as a society we should allow everyone to do what they want in terms of marriage and love, and others believe that we should do it to prevent this legal issue of treating people differently, based on their sexuality at least. Others, however, believe that either religiously or morally they don't agree with homosexuality and believe it harms the tradition of marriage, and others look more to history than particularly morals or religion and say, okay, religion has been built upon this foundation of it being man and woman, and if we remove that, we severely harm the institution of marriage, which is so very important to society, thus harming society itself. It seems as if, or at least it appears like, we won't be going backwards in any meaningful way. Nowadays it's far more accepted and believed generally as a society and as a social consciousness to allow same-sex marriage to occur, and it's highly likely that in the future we will see more same-sex marriage legalization occurring. With acts such as, for example, US restrictions on abortion, however, the actual progressiveness of society in certain areas may be slower than some would like. As always, however, I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic in the comments or on Twitter. Be sure to check back on Monday for another episode. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you soon.